Get some reviews on a hello people. I tried to get some reviews on a book that I wrote, and I believe that it is one of the best books that I've written so far. One of the best ideas that have entered my brain in the past 3 books that I've written. So instead of going around and seeing how the reviews are from the people that have read them already, which some people have given me really good reviews, other people haven't read yet. So I figured that I'd do a reading from the book, maybe 1 or 2 a week, just to, put it out there so people can enjoy what other people have read and seen already from my mind. So here we are. The book that I am reading today is Douglas Jerrod. It is for sale. So go to Douglas Jerrod and SamsonPWillings.com and order you a copy, see what it's all about, get the reviews. Also go to Rise and Fall of Samson and the Demise of the Prince, and I will have other things posted up there as well as these readings of different chapters and the goings on. So without any further ado, here we are. Douglas Jerrod by Frank J. Sapp. Me. Alright. Now I start out with a interesting little poem going on, so I'll read that. Where the hell is my body? I am aware that the shell that I'm in is supposed to be mine, but it just fits strange. More like it's not my own. Feels like someone's molded clay I have been thrust onto. It doesn't respond to any of my commands. No movement when I want. So to the ones in the sky, earth, water, and or space, I call to you with a plea. Where is my body? Jumbo of Trenton, 2014. Alright. To the interior. Insight. Since the dawn of the awakening of man's conscious mind, there has been an idea of a split of existence. To be more clear, a feeling of something more. An itch of another life, a feeling of more life than that is not being lived, rather dreamed up in the mind. But what if those dreams aren't really dreams? What if those thoughts, those fantasies, were in fact a life lived in another space, another reality? A reality that is parallel to our own, one that is much like our own, but different in many ways. Many of men have experienced these views. They have explored these strange visions, been wrote off as having multiple personality disorders, and medicated to what was viewed appropriate to psychologists and doctors alike. Some started to stop having the dreams, even beginning to think that the visions were just that, just fragments of their inner selves, trying to figure out the mysteries of their own lives. On the other hand, there are a few men that their dreams become more real, where the views of another life seem more than the life they were living. This was so strong to when their mannerisms changed drastically from their norm, where their reality seems more like the dream and their dream becomes more real with every day. With these special specimens of men, a separate ward was made to house their bodies, to keep their minds from controlling their bodies into doing actions that they weren't actually supposed to do. Well, not in this life. The mental ward was the name for this place. Mental is what the staff labeled the poor souls. Within the populations of the mental was a patient that, like the others, seemed to be seeing a separate life. A life that they didn't think existed. An existence that seemed unreal or far-fetched to believe. But to the man seemed more real than the nightmare that he was forced to walk through every day. This is a record of that man, a log, if you will, of his mind and how his two lives he seemed to be living differed from each other. Also, the talk of how the people around this man were changed due to his views of the life around him and inside what is seen in his mind, the big picture of his reality. Through this one man, views will change, life will be different, and the mind and reality will be looked at through a different light. This man will take all the things we believe to be true and flip them on their heads. It will change the way we see the world around us and make us think of the unknown. Well, I separate all these chapters into blue-eyed, green-eyed. So, blue-eye, chapter 1, patient 48564. Two men in white scrubs walked a patient tightly secured in a straitjacket slowly into a rec room area. The two carefully helped the catatonic Caucasian patient sit down in a metal folding chair that sat in front of a table. After they pushed the crazed man up to the hard-top surface, they turned and began out of the windowless room. Right before the last orderly exited through the door, he jokingly stated the obvious to stay right here, and the therapist will be in to play with your circus of a mind in a minute. He then let out a loud, bellowing laugh as he closed the door behind him, leaving the patient alone at the table of one. After a brief second of the patient slowly shifting from one direction to the other in his chair, a man dressed in a nice brown cotton suit and red with blue pinstriped tie came through the door with a professional manner behind the restrained man. The sharply dressed gentleman politely shut the door to the room, walked around the detained person, and pulled out his own chair on the other side of the table. Before he sat, the suited man placed his briefcase that he carried with him on the table, took his suit coat off, and hung it on the back of the chair. Then he took his place at the table. "I am Dr. Scott, and I will be evaluating you, and you'll stay here." The doctor put his briefcase long ways on the table, opened it up, and began to shuffle through the many case files that he overseen in the public-owned facility. Granted, it was only a portion of the cases he runs, but still, for one day's work, it was overwhelming. If he didn't know exactly what number that he was looking for, he would be lost among the mass of paperwork. Fortunately, he did know the patient number and pulled it from the many others. Patient 48564, do you remember why you were restrained? Can you tell me about what you were fighting? The doctor asked a couple of questions to try and gain the attention of the patient that wobbled in the chair on the other side of the table across from himself. He paused for a moment to let the words sink into the patient, but the straight-jacketed man continued to stare distantly at the wall. He then pulled out a pen, clicked it to write, and opened up the file to jot down what he viewed. He placed the point of the pen to the paper inside the file. I should make a note to lower your medication. At the sound of the doctor's thought on less medication, patient 48564 stopped still in his chair. He sat up straight, but continued to stare at the wall. He raised his arms up as far as he could, but he only made a jingling noise with the metal bracelets on, or metal brackets, or my bad, metal buckles on the straitjacket. As he realized he couldn't place his arms on the table, he opened his mouth to speak. Look here, doctor. You don't have to lower anything. The meds keep me straight. As for the patient number thing, I don't respond to it. If you want my attention, my name is Douglas, or at least that is what my supposed parents named me, so that is how you will address me. Well, Douglas, I will not lower your meds if that is what you want. Yes, that is what I want. I wouldn't have requested it if it wasn't what I wanted. As far as the straitjacket, I guess my real life affects my dreams. The doctor looked oddly at the patient that continued to stare at the wall. What did this mental patient say? His real life affecting his dreams? What the hell is that all about? His thoughts began to race for a moment before he put things back into perspective. So, this real life, would you like to tell me about it? The doctor carefully took out a fresh, legal yellow notepad out of his briefcase. Then he closed his briefcase. He quickly wrote the patient number for Douglas Jerrod and the date he began to record Douglas's thoughts. 12/28/64. After he transcribed the heading information for the records, he placed the pinhead at the top line of the open notepad and looked to Douglas as to intently listen to his story of his so-called life. Before I begin, do you ever feel like you are not from this place? I mean, that this feels like a dream. Douglas asked the doctor his own question as he still stared off into space. After all, if all these different people can ask all the many questions of him, he should be able to ask a question of his own every once in a while. It shouldn't just be him that has to answer all the time. Just as the reasoning for his own question crept through his mind, he realized that he only knew the doctor's last name. And how unfair is that for the doctor to know his whole name and he to only know his keeper's last name? Before you answer my first question, I have another for you. I figure since you know my whole name, you could tell me your first name, Doc. Would that make you feel better to talk to me, Douglas? Yes, it would. If you know my first name, you feel more comfortable in asking me about my life. In turn, if I know your first name, I would feel more comfortable telling you about my life. I can see your point. My first name is Edwin. Now, about your real life. Is this a life you live a lot? Edwin impatiently tried to divert the conversation back to Douglas's real life. The more minutes and seconds went by, the more he wanted to know about this real life and this madman. He could understand why a crazy individual would like to think he lived a better life. But this crazy was different than the other crazies. This man had something strange about him. Not so fast, Doc. You still haven't divulged your answer to my first question. Do you ever feel like you are not from this place? Well, I feel that everyone feels at one time that they wish they were from another place. I didn't ask you about others. I asked you about you. Maybe once or twice in my life. Oh, page flip. After the doctor's response, Douglas turned from staring off into space and looked towards Edwin for the first time. He leaned forward in his chair, not breaking eye contact with the doctor, and stared deeply into the doctor's eyes as he was peering straight into Edwin's soul. The doctor lightly tossed his pen on top of the notepad and leaned forward towards Douglas. In doing this, the doctor hoped to show that he wasn't intimidated by Douglas's deranged actions. Now, Doc, what if the times you envisioned yourself as someone else, it wasn't someone else? In fact, what if it was you in another space and time, another you, if you may, you be? That sounds like a very interesting theory, very insightful, but that is not why I am here. I am here to talk about you and your condition. Dr. Scott picked the ready-to-write pen up and readied it on the legal pad. He jotted a quick note on. Despite Douglas's multiple personality disorder, that he was very insightful about what is happening to him. He went on to say that in Douglas's pondering about his own condition, he had made up a fantasy about being in a different space and time. He finished up his note with, "It would be nice to have Douglas's view on the subject at hand, that it seemed to keep him calm about being mad. You know, Doc, it would make me feel more comfortable talking about my real life if I knew what you were writing about me." "Well, Douglas, I can't show you your records. It is against all the rules. I wouldn't tell if you don't. I won't tell if you don't. Just show me. It will make me feel less of this judging feeling that I am getting from you." "I can't show you still. You can promise you that I can promise you that I am not judging you, just writing what I see." "Writing what you see? Still, you have to take in all the information that I say bounce it around your skull, and then put it on paper. So in short, you are judging, and I will not tell you anything else until you let me see what your judgment is so far. Fine. The doctor reluctantly turned his notepad around on the table and slid it in front of Douglas to read over. What the hell is this patient talking about judgment? He has already been judged being in this place. I am just trying to help this man, he thought as Douglas carefully read the notes he wrote. Ha ha ha! I like the way you see me. I personally like how you think I am calm about being mad. So are you good about telling me about your alternate life now? Okay, I like you, Doc. I will tell you. Douglas stared back at the wall as the doctor pulled the notepad back in front of himself to take down more notes. Edwin placed a pen on the paper to ready himself for the story that Douglas was about to lay on him. He then looked up to Douglas to signal that he was ready to hear the tale, but noticed Douglas staring back at the wall. He tossed the pen back on the table. Douglas, are you still with me? Yes, Doctor. Just because I'm not looking at you doesn't mean that I am not here now. It just helps me recall. Begin whenever you're ready. And that concludes our reading today of Douglas Jerrod. Pretty cool, huh? Remember, go to Douglas Jerrod and SamsonPWillings.com to see all the information about Douglas Jerrod. And visit Samson's Rise to Power and the Fall of the Prince at Facebook.com. Thank you. This is Frank. Out.